हेलो दोस्तों, नमस्कार। स्वागत है आपका एक बार फिर से इस यूट्यूब चैनल पर। और आज मैं फिर से हाजिर हूँ आपका दिन बेहतर से बेहतर बनाने के लिए। और आज मैं आपके लिए पढ़ने वाला हूँ एक स्टोरी जो है टेल हर दैट यू लव हर। और ये है बुक चिकन सूप फॉर द कपल सोल से, और उसका चैप्टर लव एंड इंटीमेसी से हम पढ़ रहे हैं टेल हर दैट यू लव हर। I shall call him Dr. Case. He was an old school country doctor and a close friend of mine 20 years ago. In the years that followed, I often stopped in his little Colorado town to see him when I went west. And sometimes he would tell me stories about people we both had known. He told me about John and Louis. John was ranchman, big, quiet, unlettered and strong as a horse. He had begun with 50 head of sheep. Ambitious and frugal, in 10 years he owned 2,000 ewes and ample pasture of them. Next, he bought an alfalfa farm at the edge of town and fattened his lambs. By the time he was 45, he was a prosperous man. Then he married. Lois was a local girl who had finished high school and gone to work as a waitress in the restaurant in town. John met her there the summer she was 20. Soon he began driving from alfalfa farm every day for a 10 o'clock cup of coffee. You could set your watch by the time he drove up and parked in front of the restaurant. John was methodical as a windmill, dependable as the seasons. Louis chattered to him about the weather, the crops, and harmless local gossip. John merely watched her and smiled and nodded his head. Finally, he would say, "Got to the work? So long." This went for 3 months. Then one morning, Doc Case had stopped in for coffee after a call and heard it. John said, "Louis, I want you to marry me." Louis caught her breath and almost spilled the coffee. Doc said it was as though the two of them, John and Louis, were all alone. Louis said, "John, maybe I will, but I want a day or two to think about it." John nodded and drank his coffee and said, "Got to get to work. So long." They were married 2 weeks later. After a honeymoon in Colorado Springs, they settled down on the alfalfa farm, and Louis had the house painted and papered and refurnished with things from Denver. All that first year, John had workmen out there, putting in new kitchen, building a screen porch, but Doc Case knew things weren't going right. Twice, John called him out to see Louis, and he discovered that Louis was not happy. She was not well either. She said she had frightful headaches, but there was nothing that Doc could put his finger on. The second time he went out to see her, he asked her if John was treating her right. Louis answered that John was the best husband any woman could ask for. Only well, he did not say much, and a woman wants to talk to. After that, things seemed to straighten out. When Doc saw her in town a few weeks later, Louis said, "I guess I was just imagining lot of aches and pains. I have decided to be big and strong like John." It was not until 18 months later that Doc heard from them again. At 3:30 one morning, a banging on his door wakened him. John was there, his car out front with the motor running. "Doc," he said, "Louis is awful sick. You got to do something quick." Louis was in the car, almost fainting with pain. They had been out at John's sheep ranch for a few days and the pain had struck her late that evening. She tried to shrug it off, but it got so bad she could not stand it. She fainted on the 30-mile drive to town. The doctor took her over to his 4-bed hospital and operated. Her appendix had burst, but she railed by down, and Doc Case thought he had won. He told John they would not know for 24 hours, but it looked as if the worst was over. John cried like a baby. "She's got to get well, Doc," he said. She got to. By evening, her condition was worse. Doc gave her 2 plasma transfusions during the night. Yet she weakened statedly. "I'm just not strong enough," she whispered to the doctor. "What do you mean?" Doc demanded. "I thought you were going to be big and strong like John." Louis smiled wanly. "John is so strong he doesn't need me. If he did, he'd say so, wouldn't he?" "Louis," Doc told her, "John does need you, whether he says so or not." She shook her head and closed her eyes. In the office, Doc said to John, "She doesn't want to get well." "She's got to get well," John exclaimed. "Look, Doc, how about a transfusion?" The doctor explained that he had given her plasma. "I mean my blood, Doc. I'm strong enough for both of us." The doctor led him down the hall. "Do you love that girl, John?" he asked. "Wouldn't have married her if I didn't," John said. "Have you ever told her so?" John's eyes were baffled. "Haven't I given her everything I could? What more can a man do?" "Talk to her," Doc said. "I'm not a talking man, Doc." "Hell, she knows that." He gripped Doc's shoulders. "Give her some of my blood." The doctor thought a moment, then he led John to the little laboratory, took a blood sample and typed it. At last he said, "All right, John, in 10 minutes. The doctor went to Louis' rooms and told her that John wanted to give her a transfusion. And there was a flicker of interest. He took her pulse. It was weak and faltering slightly. He knew there was only a slim chance. Calling the nurse into the hall, he told her that what he was going to do. In a few moments, he led John into Louis' room. The operating table had been placed beside her bed and a curtain rigged up between bed and table. The nurse held the curtain aside as John lay down on the table. He put out a big awkward hand and took Louis' hand and said, "Now I'm going to make you well, Louis." Without looking at him, she whispered, "Why?" "Why do you suppose?" John exclaimed. "I don't know," she said. "You are my wife, aren't you?" There was no answer. The nurse lowered the curtain, swept John's arm and inserted a needle. John flexed the muscles proudly. "Here it comes," he said to Louis. A moment later he asked, "How is she talking it, Doc?" Beyond the curtain, Doc Case had inserted a needle in Louis' wrist and relaxed the lamp on the tube. His fingers were on the pulse in her other wrist. "Okay, John," he said. "How does it feel, Louis?" John asked. "All right," she whispered. "Get a gallon of the blood in you," John said, "and you will talk as loud as I do." Her pulse seemed to strengthen slightly. "John," she whispered. "Yes, I love you, John." There was a moment of silence. Then John said, "Louis, you got to get well." "Why?" she whispered. "You have to do it for me. I need you." John hesitated and his voice choked. "I love you." Her pulse almost surged. "You never told me," she said. He said, "I never thought I had to." The pulse was steady now. "John," she said, "tell me again." He hesitated, then repeated the words, I love you, Lois. More than anything in the world, I love you and I need you. And by God, I am going to make you well. The doctor removed the needle from her wrist and took the plasma bottle from the rack beneath the towel and set them aside. He checked her pulse again. It was impossible, but there it was, steady and strong. How are you doing over there? John asked, his voice under control again, but Lois couldn't answer. She was weeping. She's coming along fine, Doc Case said. You have done it, John. He signaled to the nurse, who pulled the needle from John's arm, removed the jar from beside the operating table and drew the curtain aside. Then she and the doctor went out into the hall. When the doctor returned several minutes later, John was sitting with both of Lois' hands in his, talking to her. She was still a mighty sick girl, Doc said. And he told me the story, but I knew she was going to get well, and she said. Doc shook his head. It was enough that the miracle happened. John's blood was the wrong type of her, probably would have killed her. What did it matter if she got another pint of plasma while his blood went into a glass jar? What that girl needed was John, and she got him. Okay guys, so this is the power of communication and power of love. If you love someone, then tell her or tell him. Tell your loved ones that you love them. And that's all guys. मैं मिलता हूँ आपसे अगली वीडियो में. जब तक के लिए आप अपना बहुत बहुत ख्याल रखें और खुश रहें. थैंक यू.